This is the story of Callum Whitmore and his wife, Isolde Whitmore. They had built something that looked, from most angles, like a good life. A house with enough rooms, a daughter who laughed easily, a marriage that had survived the particular exhaustion of early parenthood and come out the other side still intact, still warm even. But Isolde had learned, somewhere in the middle years, that warmth and safety were not the same thing. Callum loved her. She had never seriously doubted that. What she had begun to doubt, slowly and without drama, was whether his love had ever been loud enough to matter. Loud enough to reach across a dinner table, or a Sunday afternoon, or a Christmas living room when it needed to compete with his mother's silence. The story that follows is not about a marriage falling apart. It is about a woman discovering the shape of something she had been living inside for years without a name for it. The mornings had their own rhythm, and Isolde had come to depend on it the way you depend on something you've stopped noticing. The sound of the boiler, the particular creak of the third stair. Callum made coffee. She made Fenna's lunch. He read something on his phone while the coffee brewed, and she cut the crusts off bread in the way Fenna had requested since she was 3 and still at 6 had not rescinded. These were the small devotions of a functioning household, and Isolde performed them with genuine care, even when she was tired, even when something sat at the back of her throat that she hadn't yet found words for. Fenna was the kind of child who filled rooms, not loudly, but completely. She narrated her cereal. She had strong opinions about which cup was luckiest. That particular Tuesday morning in early December, she had announced at breakfast that she was going to ask Santa for a telescope, a hamster named Cheddar, and one other thing she hadn't decided yet. And then she'd looked at her orange juice with the focused expression of someone doing serious administrative work. "You've got until Christmas Eve," Callum had said, and winked at Isolde over Fenna's head. Isolde had smiled back. She still smiled at him easily. That had never gone away. What had gone away, or rather, what had gradually been worn smooth, like a stone in a river, was the feeling that her life inside this marriage was fully witnessed. Not by Callum exactly. He was present. He was attentive in the ways he knew how to be attentive. That there was a room in their life together that Isolde had long ago stopped trying to redecorate because Callum didn't seem to notice the wallpaper was peeling. That room was his mother. Nora Whitmore was 71 and had the particular gift of making her disapproval felt without ever stating it. She did not shout. She did not make scenes. What she did was subtler and, in Isolde's experience, far more durable. A comment about the way Isolde dressed Fenna for cold weather. A long pause before answering a direct question. The way she spoke to Callum in the kitchen at family gatherings, in a low voice, and stopped when Isolde entered. Small things, the kind of things that, described to a friend, sounded almost like nothing. She paused before she answered. She was talking quietly, so, and yet the cumulative weight of 10 years of pauses and quiet conversations and looks Isolde wasn't meant to notice had settled somewhere inside her chest, and some days she could feel it when she breathed. Callum, to his credit, was not oblivious in an uncaring way. He was oblivious in the way of someone who had grown up inside a particular climate and no longer felt the temperature. Nora was his mother. She was to him simply Nora. A woman who could be difficult, yes, who had opinions, certainly, but who loved her family and meant well, fundamentally. He believed that. Isolde did not entirely disbelieve it. She just knew that meaning well and causing harm were not, in her experience, mutually exclusive. The Sunday visits had been a fixture since Fenna was born. Nora lived 40 minutes away, in the house where Callum had grown up, and she came every second Sunday for lunch. Isolde cooked. Nora complimented the food in ways that contained, like Russian dolls, smaller criticisms nested inside. "This is lovely, Isolde. I always find lamb a bit rich, but Callum's always had a strong stomach." Isolde would nod and refill glasses and say something mild. Callum would notice none of it. Afterward, when Nora had gone and Fenna was in bed and they were cleaning up together, he might say, "Mum seemed in good form today," and the Isolde would say, and the moment would pass. as all such moments had passed for years, leaving no visible mark. The hairline crack, the one she hadn't seen developing, ran through the center of that through all the small surrenders, through the version of herself she'd slowly constructed that could sit at that table and smile and absorb it and say nothing. She hadn't known Fenna was absorbing it too. It was the second week of December when Fenna told her. They were driving back from school, and the afternoon light was doing what it did in December in the northern counties, fading at 4 o'clock like someone losing interest. Fenna was in the back seat, still in her coat, watching the fields go past with the sideways gaze she used when she was thinking through something complicated. "Mummy," she said, "I decided the third thing. The third Christmas thing? For Santa." Isolde glanced in the rearview mirror. "Okay, what is it?" Fenna took a breath, the particular breath of someone about to say something they'd been rehearsing. "I want Santa to make Grandma Nora be nice to you." The car was warm. The heater had been running for 20 minutes. Isolde felt, nonetheless, suddenly cold. Not unpleasantly, but like something had moved through her that had weight. "What do you mean, sweetheart? She's not very nice to you," Fenna said, with the matter-of-fact calm of a child who has observed something, categorized it, and simply waited for an appropriate opportunity to report it. "She doesn't look at you the same as everyone else. She looks at you like you said something wrong, even when you didn't." Isolde kept her eyes on the road. The tightening in her throat was the kind she'd learned to manage without letting it reach her face. "Grandma loves us," she said, carefully. "I know," said Fenna, "but she's not nice to you." There was a distinction there, a child's distinction, clean and unsentimental, that Isolde understood with a precision that surprised her. Love and nice as separate categories, not opposites, simply different things. And her 6-year-old daughter had made that distinction without anyone teaching her to, because she had been watching the way children watch, below the level of adult conversation, filing information away. That evening, Isolde stood at the kitchen sink after dinner, washing a single glass slowly, and thought about how long Fenna must have been carrying that observation. A week? A year? Since she was old enough to notice expressions? Callum came in and picked up a dish towel. He dried things in the slightly too vigorous way he had, and she watched his hands and thought about asking him. The question was already shaped. Did you know Fenna notices? But the question assumed he would understand why it mattered, and she wasn't sure he would, and she wasn't sure she had the patience that night to explain. So she said, "Fenna was funny in the car." "What'd she say?" "Third Christmas wish. She wants Santa to make Nora be nicer to me." A beat. Callum laughed, a short, slightly uncomfortable laugh. "That's very Fenna." "Yes," said Isolde. He put down the dish towel. He looked at her in the way he sometimes did when he knew she was feeling something he wasn't quite tracking. "She's a perceptive kid." "She is. Mom can be." He paused. "You know how she is." "I do," said Isolde. There was something happening in that exchange. Below the words, in the pauses, in the way neither of them was looking directly at the other. Isolde thought, this is the moment. You could say it now. She thought about all the time she had stood at the edge of this particular conversation and turned back. She opened her mouth to say something, and she would think about this later, with a feeling she couldn't quite name. Callum said, very quietly, "I don't know. Maybe someone should talk to her, or something." She looked at him. He was staring at the counter, slightly dazed. Something about the phrase had come out wrong, too loose, too vague, the cadence off, as if he briefly tuned into a frequency he didn't recognize. He blinked. "Sorry, I don't know how to fix it." "I know you don't," she said. She meant it gently. She meant it also, somewhere beneath that, as the truest thing she'd said in months. She chose a Sunday morning. Not the Sunday of Nora's visit, but the one before, a quiet one, gray outside, Fenna at her friend Petra's house until noon. Isolde had made tea and sat at the kitchen table with it and waited for Callum to come downstairs. And when he did, reading something on his phone, she said, "Can you sit down? I want to talk about something." He sat. He put down his phone. To his credit, he put it fully down, face down, the way he did when he knew a conversation was real. "I've been thinking about Nora," she said. He waited. I'm not trying to make it into a big thing. I just need you to actually hear what I'm going to say, not manage it." "Okay," he said. She had thought about how to say this many times, and each time she thought about it, it had come out either too calm, like a memo, or too raw, like something that had been waiting too long and had grown teeth. She wanted neither. She wanted simply to tell the truth in the plainest possible way. "Your mother makes me feel like a guest in my own family," she said. "Not a welcome guest, the kind you endure. And she has done this since before we were married, and I have spent 10 years telling myself it didn't matter, or that I was imagining it, or that she loved you, and that was what counted. And maybe all of that is true. But our daughter noticed. Fenna has been watching your mother look at me the way she looks at me, and she has understood it well enough to make it a Christmas wish. And I cannot keep pretending that doesn't mean something." Callum was very still. "She's not," he stopped, started again. "She doesn't mean to be. I know she doesn't mean to be," Isolde said. "I've said that to myself more times than you've probably thought about it. She doesn't mean to, but Callum, that's become the reason for everything. The reason not to address it, not to name it, not to. She doesn't mean to. And maybe that's true, but the effect is the same whether she means it or not. I felt diminished in front of my own child for years, and you have not." Her voice tightened slightly, then released. "You have not stood between me and that, not once." He looked down at his tea. She watched his face go through something complicated. She had expected defensiveness, a marshalling of examples, a reordering of events. Instead, he looked like someone doing arithmetic that kept coming out the same wrong number. "I didn't know it was. I knew she was difficult. I knew she and you had. It's not a dynamic, Callum. It's not something we have together. It's something she does, and you not seeing it clearly. I understand why. She's your mother, but the effect of you not seeing it clearly is that I've had to absorb it alone for 10 years while telling Fenna that family is complicated and Grandma loves us, and that's what matters." He said nothing for a long time. Outside, a car passed. The boiler clicked. "What do you want?" he asked finally. His voice was not defensive. It was genuinely asking. "I want to stop going to Sunday lunch," she said. "Not forever, not as a punishment. I need to take some space from it, from her. I need to not sit at that table for a while and receive the way she speaks to me and pretend it's fine. I need you to tell her that we're taking a break from Sunday visits for a month. And I need you to do it without making it about me being sensitive." "I'll talk to her," he said. "Callum." She waited until he looked at her. "Not in the way you've talked to her before. Not a buffer conversation. I need you to actually say, Isolde needs some space, and I'm supporting that, without softening it until it disappears." He held her gaze. "Okay," he said. It was quiet in the kitchen. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I'm not trying to take her away from you," she said. "I know that's not what this feels like from where you're sitting, but I need you to know that's not what this is." "I know," he said. She thought he probably did know. She also thought that knowing and feeling were different rooms in the same house, and that he was standing in the doorway between them, unsure which one to enter. February arrived like a slow exhale. The Sunday visits had stopped, and the absence of them had created a silence in the house that was, Isolde noticed this with some guilt, not entirely unpleasant. She had more Sundays. She had afternoons where she cooked what she wanted, fed Fenna at 5 without ceremony, let the hours unspool without the particular tension that had lived in her chest between 10 in the morning and Nora's arrival at noon. Callum had spoken to his mother. He told Isolde about it in one paragraph, measured, careful. "I told her you needed a break. She was hurt. I told her I was supporting it. Isolde had thanked him. She had meant the thanks. She had also waited afterward for something more, for him to see that he'd understood more in the saying of it, that speaking the words aloud had illuminated something about what he'd been protecting all these years. But that conversation didn't come. He was not cold. He was, in his way, more present than he'd been in a while, as though the act of taking a clear side for once had released something in him. He brought her tea without being asked. He listened when she talked about work. On a Saturday in January, he'd taken Fenna to the market alone so Isolde could have 3 hours, and had returned with the wrong bread and a story about Fenna convincing a cheese vendor to let her sample 4 different varieties. Isolde had laughed and felt something tender and real, but there were evenings when she watched him check his phone. A text from Nora, she could tell by the way his face arranged itself, and return it to his pocket without saying anything. And she understood that he was managing 2 separate relationships with care and discretion, and that the discretion was itself a kind of border. He was not telling his mother the whole truth. He was also, possibly, not telling himself. Nora, she had learned through Callum's sister Bridget, was telling the family that Isolde had become difficult since Fenna started school, that she was stressed and needed space. Bridget had relayed this neutrally over the phone with the tone of someone delivering information rather than taking a side. Isolde had listened and said, which was the same sound she made at the kitchen sink. The sound that meant I've absorbed this and have chosen not to say the true thing. She was aware of her own pattern. She had always been aware of it, in the abstract way you can recognize a habit while continuing to perform it. What was new, and she turned this over during commutes, during the slow minutes before sleep, was the absence of shame in it. She had spent a decade mildly ashamed of her own resentment, reading it as evidence of a character flaw. You are someone who cannot get along with your husband's mother. You are someone who cannot simply absorb this gracefully. The shame had been part of what kept her silent. It was going, not quickly, not with revelation, simply ebbing the way things ebb when you stop feeding them. Fenna had not asked again about Grandma Nora. The Christmas wish had passed without discussion, and Fenna had received the telescope and not the hamster, and had moved on with the particular resilience of children who process things horizontally rather than vertically, alongside life rather than through it. But one afternoon in February she had said, very casually, "We haven't seen Grandma in a while." And Isolde had said, "We've been having some quiet Sundays." And Fenna had said, "Okay," and gone back to her book. The okay had weight, not resignation. Simply satisfaction, the sound of an answer that is good enough. In March, Callum's mother sent a card. Not to Callum, to Isolde. It was a generic card, the kind bought in batches, and in it Nora had written, in her precise handwriting, "I hope you're all well. I miss my Sunday visits, Nora." Isolde read it 3 times. She thought about what it cost Nora to send it, a woman of that generation, with that particular architecture of pride. She did not think it was an apology. She did not think Nora was fully aware that one was owed. But it was a gesture, and Isolde could hold both of those things at once. The inadequacy of it, and the cost of it. She put it on the kitchen counter and didn't say anything to Callum until he spotted it himself that evening. He picked it up, read it, set it down. "That's something," he said. "It is," she agreed. Neither of them said what kind of something. They started going again in April, twice a month rather than every second Sunday, and Isolde had set that term herself, and Callum had conveyed it, and Nora had accepted it without comment. The first visit was a warm afternoon. The windows of Nora's house opened for the first time that year, and the kitchen smelled of the lamb stew Nora had always made since Callum's childhood, the one recipe she seemed to deploy as language rather than simply food. Fenna ran ahead to the garden. Nora was at the stove. She turned when Isolde entered and said, "Hello, Isolde," in a voice that was careful in a way it had not been before. And Isolde said, "Hello, Nora," in a voice that was equally careful, and they looked at each other for a moment. 2 women who had never properly learned each other's language, standing in a kitchen that smelled of something familiar. It was not warm, it was not cold, it was something that did not yet have a name. Lunch was without incident. Nora passed things before being asked and did not offer any comments containing hidden smaller comments. And Isolde ate her stew and talked to Bridget about the school run and watched Fenna show Nora a drawing she'd done of a horse, which she had titled Correct Horse in large letters, reasoning that Isolde had explained to her that sometimes horses were drawn wrong. Nora had laughed at the title, a real laugh, surprised out of her. And Fenna had looked pleased, and Isolde had watched it happen and felt something complex and unresolved move through her. Walking to the car afterward, Fenna between them, Callum found her hand. She let him take it. That was okay, he said. It was, she said. He was quiet for a moment. The street was very still. Sunday still, the particular absence of weekday noise. I've been thinking, he said, and stopped. The stop was the kind that meant he was still finding the shape of what he wanted to say. I know I wasn't. Another stop. I think I let you carry things you shouldn't have been carrying alone. She kept walking. She did not fill the silence he'd left. I don't know how not to have seen it for so long, he said. The sentence had a quality of genuine bewilderment, not performed. I think I didn't want to, because if I saw it clearly, I'd have to choose, and I didn't want it to be a choice. I know, she said. That wasn't. He exhaled. That wasn't fair to you. Fenna had run ahead to the car. They were alone on the pavement for a moment, and Isolde stopped walking and turned to look at him, at this man she had known for 15 years, who had a particular way of holding his shoulders when he was tired, whose coffee she knew the strength of, whose mother had slowly taken something from her that she hadn't been offered back until she'd asked. No, she said. It wasn't. She said it without heat, without the performance of hurt that she might once have needed in order for it to feel real. She said it simply because it was true, and because she had stopped needing him to understand the full weight of it in order for her to know the weight herself. He nodded, slowly. Fenna called from the car, "Are you coming?" They walked toward her. At the car door, helping Fenna with her seatbelt, Isolde thought about the Christmas wish, about what it meant that her daughter had seen it before she'd allowed herself to fully name it, about the particular education that is watching your mother absorb something without protest year after year and learning to do the same, or perhaps learning not to. She thought about who Fenna would be at 16, at 25, at 38, whether she would recognize her own weight when she was carrying it, whether she would know, before a decade had passed, to put it down. That was the thing that had changed. Not Nora, not entirely. Nora would remain who she was, cautiously adjusted, but not remade. Not Callum, who was learning something slowly and without guarantees. What had changed was that Isolde had stopped waiting for permission to know that what she felt was real. It seemed, looking back, like a small thing, the kind of thing that wouldn't make sense if you tried to explain it, the kind of thing that changed, nonetheless, everything. She closed the car door. She got in the front seat. Callum started the engine. Fenna said something about correct horse, and whether Grandma had properly understood that horses were sometimes drawn wrong, and Callum said he thought Grandma had understood, and Fenna said she wasn't sure. Isolde looked out the window as they drove. The afternoon light was doing what it does in April, arriving at last, tentative and golden, as if unsure of its welcome. She did not look away from it.